Okay. So just as a reminder for those of you who are perhaps not researchers in the audience, UK Biobank was set up as one of the very few cohort studies worldwide that's truly an open access resource, which means it's available for bona fide researchers to conduct health-related researches in the public interest, and it's available for both academic researchers and researchers from commercial companies, both here in the UK and abroad. So it's a truly global health resource for research use. There's no preferential or exclusive access to the resource. You want it to be the same rules for everybody and as transparent, as equitable as possible. UK Biobank is set up as a charity, so all the costs that are incurred to access the data are purely based on a cost recovery model. What we do ask of researchers is that they return their results back to UK Biobank. So by that we mean any derived variables that have been generated as part of the research project, or the underlying methodology or the code used to generate those results. They're returned back to UK Biobank so that we can then make them available for other researchers to use. Research applications can be very broad. We don't ask researchers to focus on either a specific risk factor or a specific health outcome. They can involve a range of genetic data or a range of health outcome data. So, for example, researchers can look at how all of the genetic variants are associated with a single outcome, or alternatively, how one single variant is related to a whole range of health outcomes at one time. And we also welcome applications that are more methodological in nature, so how to improve the techniques by which we can answer the health research questions that are important today. I mean, the main consideration for UK Biobank is that the scope of the research project is objectively and clearly defined, and that research goals are well defined. And this is so that any publications that are then produced from the research, we know that they've been approved for use by UK Biobank. So just as a quick brief overview of what data is currently in the resource, of course we have all of the baseline information. So when participants were recruited between 2006 and 2010, they answered a whole range of questions on lifestyle, medical history, socio-demographics, etc., performed cognitive function and hearing tests, a whole range of physical measures. We also have data on environmental measures for the full cohort, so air pollution, noise pollution, metrics of the built environment. Urinary biomarkers are now publicly available, as well as the genetic data on a subset of the cohort, with genetic data on the full cohort to be made available very soon. We also have web-based questionnaire data available for those participants for whom we have emails, where we invite them to complete questionnaires online. So far we have information on dietary habits, occupational history, cognitive function, and so on. We also have physical activity monitor data on 100,000 participants, and of course the new imaging study which started in 2015, and at the moment we have data on about 15,000 individuals, and that's continually accruing for the next 5 or 6 years. And as Rory mentioned, we have health outcome data, death, cancer, and hospital inpatient records, also publicly available. So what's coming in the next 12 to 18 months? Well, hopefully very soon, in the next few weeks, we'll be releasing the genetic data, that's the genotyped and the imputed data for the full cohort, together with data from an online mental health questionnaire that participants kindly completed. Later on in the year, we plan to do an update of the death, cancer, and the hospital inpatient records for the full cohort, together with another questionnaire that participants have completed on symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome and other gastrointestinal conditions. And then towards earlier on New Year, we aim to release the biochemistry data for the full cohort for the serum and the HbA1c, together with some additional cognitive function tests that were introduced fairly recently in the Imaging Centre, and also the first tranche of primary care data, probably later on in 2018, for a good chunk of the cohort. And I should also say that whenever we will release the updated database to researchers, that will also include updated imaging data as well for each release. So quite a lot coming over the next 12 to 18 months. So researchers, please keep a lookout as for what's on its way and when. So access so far, we opened our doors to researchers end of March 2012. On Monday, we had our 5,000th registered researcher, so a bit of a milestone for us. We have just over 900 applications that have been submitted to use the resource, of which about half of those are approved. Researchers have the data, the projects are underway, and already there's over 200 peer-reviewed publications out there. The projects cover a very broad range of topics, and please have a look at the website where you can see all the summaries of what research is currently being done using the resource. So the number of registered researchers has been increasing year on year since we started, and this just shows you the number of registrations from the UK in blue and then from international researchers in red. And what you can see is that certainly over the last 18 months, the amount of interest coming from abroad has surpassed that coming from the UK. So the word is getting out there that this resource is not just for the UK, that it has a global reach. So where are these researchers coming from? Well, we have about 2,700 researchers already registered to use the resource in the UK, about 1,400 from the US and Canada, just shy of 600 in Europe, and the rest from around the world. And I anticipate that certainly over the next 12 months or so, we'll have a massive increase in interest, certainly from the US, Europe, and Asia. So in terms of applications, you see a similar picture, a massive increase in the amount of applications submitted to use the resource since we started, particularly in the last couple of years. And again, the amount of applications being submitted from international researchers has surpassed that of researchers from the UK, certainly last year and for the first half of this year. And in terms of academic versus commercial interest, the vast majority of interest so far has been from the academic world, as you might expect, although, again, in the last 18 months or so, we're starting to see more of an increase from the commercial world. So the likes of GSK, Regeneron, Siemens, Google are now starting to submit applications to use the resource for public health research. The vast majority of applications are for data only, where we have a very low threshold to release the data. We want the resource to be used as widely as possible, although we have a much more stringent criteria for researchers to access the biological samples and to ask to recontact participants. We're currently reviewing our policies about access to samples and to recontact participants, because these can be thought of as either limited or depletable in nature. And so we want to ensure that we have the most efficient resource moving over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and that we don't decline the resource before then. So there's a whole range of different types of research being done using UK Biobank. About 3/4 of applications are interested in the genetic data, but also the imaging, the cognitive function data, looking at cardiovascular disease, mortality, hypertension, and so on and so forth. And also, what I think of interest is conditions that you perhaps have been up until now relatively understudied, things like vision disorders, hearing disorders, Crohn's disease, factors relating to social isolation. All of these are of interest now to researchers and are possible using UK Biobank. So just a few slides on streamlining the access resource. So I think we'd all agree that the number of applications, I think, is only ever going to continue, certainly over the next few years. And we want to make it easier for researchers easier and quicker for the researchers to access the data, whilst at the same time maintaining vigorous review of access to request biological samples and to recontact participants. So, at the moment, researchers will be very well aware of this. We have an existing access system that's built on a customized platform, which was quick to develop at the time, but it's not very flexible. And I think the members of the access team who are here today will tell they often bang their heads against the wall about how clunky the system is. And it's worked well up until now, but it's clear that we need a new system to cope with the demand. So we're currently in the final stages of developing a bespoke system for UK Biobank, which has been developed in collaboration with colleagues from the University of Oxford. And the aim of this new system is to simplify the management of applications, increase the capacity, speed up the whole application process from the time of submission to getting the data, and provide increased reporting capability, so it's a completely transparent process. So the main key changes that researchers will want to be aware of is there'll be an improved user interface. It will be easier for researchers to use. There's only a single registration, so you no longer have to register if you change institutes, for example. And perhaps most importantly, we're moving down to a single application form, so it'll be quicker and easier for researchers to access the data. At the moment, communicating with researchers is all done through email, and with this new system, all the messaging will be done inside the portal itself, so it'll be much easier for the access team to keep track of who said what and when. We have a simplified process for dealing with material transfer agreements, so that remove the need for extra paperwork if you want to increase the scope of projects, for example. Much better reporting capability, so we can provide full transparency of the whole access process. Much better management of how we deal with projects once their data has been released and the projects are underway. And researchers will have a dedicated homepage, so that once you get an authenticated access, you can access the data showcase directly and access GWAS results and so on and so forth. So hopefully good changes are happening for the researchers and for ourselves as well, and it will be much, much easier to access the data over the next few years. So fingers crossed, this new system will be available later on in the summer of this year, and I, for one, will certainly look forward to using it. So thank you very much.